we're going to work on another part for our little notebook. We're actually going to work on some of the first sheets now. What you need is a piece of gingham check, real gingham. Gingham check is the pattern is woven in, so it's the same front and back. And you want a piece that has the selvage edge on it. So I have two pieces here because we're going to do Grainline and we're going to do the parts of the fabric. So these are the two we're going to work on. And the other thing that you need is a pen that will write on fabric. So I always like to use a nice fine indelible marker like this, and then make sure you have something that will keep it from bleeding through while you're working. So we're going to start with parts of the fabric, and the parts of the fabric are our selvage edge. You'll also need a little ruler, or I think it makes it a lot easier. So the first thing we're going to do is just mark our selvage edge, and this is the selvage edge. The selvage is where it is woven, where it's attached to the loom when it's woven, and a lot of times you'll see little holes. That's actually little hooks that were in there, and then the edge, the selvage edge, is actually more tightly woven. So we're just going to mark on here, we're just going to write selvage. Hang on to it because it wants to move. We're going to write selvage on that direction. Okay, and then we have our threads and how they're woven in. So the one that goes from right to left is weft. And I always make sure I line this up perfectly with one of my lines. And we're going to actually draw across here, put our little arrows, and we're going to write weft. And then the one that goes up and down is warp. And I usually make these cross at the edge, put our little arrows, and write warp. Now, you may have heard of woof. It's an old term, but woof and weft are the same thing. So if you want to, where it says weft, you can put woof. And it's spelled just like a dog's sound, W-O-O-F, woof. So that is actually a weaving term. Weft or woof goes right to left, warp goes up and down, and selvage goes up and down. Selvage is actually the edge where it was woven on the loom. So this is the first one. These are the parts of the fabric, and you want to glue them in like this. You can see on this one I used a much darker pen, and it's much easier to see. I used a really light pen, and I think it's probably hard for you to see. So you might want to get, so this is my super fine one that I use when I do pattern making. This might work better, this weight. It actually has two different tips. You can see that might be easier to see. So I'm going to switch to this one for the next part. The parts of the fabric. The next one I'm going to just flip over is our Grainline. And for the Grainline, you could use one of these that doesn't have the selvage edge, but sometimes it's hard to tell which is your warp and your weft. The weft, which is right to left, is our crosswise grain. So we're going to, it's the same line, but it has a different name because it has a different purpose. So we're going to go across like this. You do not want to rest your pen on there very long. It really absorbs. So this is cross grain, all right? And you can see it bleeding through a little bit. And then the up and down makes sense. It's lengthwise. And then you have one more. It's called bias. Now bias is actually cuts right through the middle of both of these, and that's why it's really important to have gingham check. So if you have gingham, you can actually take your little ruler and go from corner to corner through your gingham like this and draw it. The other way, if you don't have a gingham, let's say if you were at home just sewing, you want to turn this like this. See how I've turned it and made this perfect 90-degree angle? This line right here is my bias. So I can do it this direction. I'll just show you like that. And this is my bias line. And I can actually just slide my ruler in against that. And when I fold this back, that's my bias. Now I'm going to do my bias this direction just because I think it's easier to read. So I'm going to line up between my little, I'm using the green, going corner to corner. And this is bias. So these are your grain lines, and you'll glue these in on your Grainline sheet.